To welcome you to our program, Affordable Housing in a Just World, Basic and Beyond. I also want to welcome you to the new year and a new beginning and a new opportunity to think about the communities in which we live, and a new year to listen and learn about affordable housing, how affordable housing gets built. This program is sponsored by Congregation Beth Chaim of Princeton Junction, Har Sinai Temple of Pennington, the Jewish Center of Princeton. And I want to thank my fellow organizers, Michelle Alpern, Sarah Just, Linda Oppenheim, Lori Watson, and Peter Buxman, who is also serving as tonight's monitor. I also want to thank Linda Milstein, who is managing our Zoom this evening. Just a few technical points. You will remain muted throughout the program. We encourage you to enter questions in the chat at the bottom of your screen. Lori Watson will be directing them to our monitor and give the panelists during the Q&A. The program is being recorded, so if you don't want your face to appear, please turn off your video. We will send the link for the recording to you along with future resources for further study of the issues discussed tonight. So now we're going to hear from Rabbi Adina Blum from Beth Chaim. Rabbi Blum?
Thank you so much, Betsy. This week, Jews around the world are in the annual reading cycle that tells the story of how the ancient Israelites left slavery in Egypt at long last and started their march towards freedom. And it's a very powerful story, one that the Jewish people revisits every year during the festival of Passover. And again, at this time of year when we read this section of the Torah. And it's a story that is lifted up by other faith traditions as well, that after 400 years of being enslaved by the kings of Egypt, that the ancient Israelites were finally free, not only to dictate their own destiny, but also to worship their one true God. But the path to freedom is not always straightforward. We read this week how God intentionally sent the Israelites on the long way to the promised land. And we know that that long way is made even longer en route when the children of Israel learn that the generation of slaves in Egypt are not entitled to go to the promised land, but only their children. And so 40 years of wandering is about to ensue. I think the same is true for us, especially here in America. We also have a history of slavery. And as we attempt to distance ourselves from that history, we still have not yet reached the promised land. And the legacy of those years of enslavement of other people continues to plague us. And that, I believe, is one of the reasons that we have all come together tonight. I'm so excited to see so many faces who are interested in learning about this topic of affordable housing, but also how we can create a more just society, the society as we want it to be, not as it is. And so as we also wind our way toward the promised land that we hope to build together, I offer up one of my favorite readings from the prayer book that my community uses on Shabbat, on our Sabbath. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Blum, for your warm words and welcome and inspiring, your warm welcome and your inspiring words. For those of you who are just joining the program, I want to repeat the technical instructions. You will stay muted throughout the program. If you want to appear on the video, if you don't want to appear on the video, turn off your video. And finally, enter any questions you may have in the chat at the bottom of your screen. Moderator this evening is Peter Buxbaum, a former New Jersey Superior Court Judge, of counsel to Lanza and Lanza in Flemington, court master to 6 Mount Laurel cases, and the former mayor of West Almwell Township. It is my pleasure to introduce and turn over the program to the Honorable Peter Buxbaum.
Thank you, Betsy. And thank all of you who are here. Thank you, Rabbi, for opening with those quotations from our prayer book. And thanks to all the help from the organizers for putting this program together. This program follows on the heels of our first program in October, which was the theme of which could be Mount Laurel, how did we get here? And after that program, we got the requests, comments that, okay, we know how we got here now, what do we do? And that's the theme of this evening and tonight's program. How do we actually achieve movement towards the creation of affordable housing? With that in mind, I'll introduce them in more detail later, but we have three speakers, the first of which, Alice Small will discuss the role of a nonprofit housing developer. And then we'll have Mitch Newman, who works for a for-profit developer, describe that role in moving affordable housing forward. And finally, we'll hear from Diane Ciccone, who's a former municipal official and has been a participant in the conflicts that occur in all of our communities when actually affordable housing is proposed. I would just note that I myself have been involved in this since my age began with a 2. It now begins with a 7. And you can see this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And hopefully we're picking you all up in the 23rd or 24th mile. So we only have a few more miles to go before we actually can achieve results. With that, I'd like to introduce Alice, who is the president of the PCHDC rather, Princeton Community Housing Development Corporation, which is a separate entity from Princeton Community Housing, and it's designed to be the strategic new project development and fundraising arm of Princeton Community Housing. Alice has been on the PCH board since 2014 and has served as chair of the governance committee of the Development Corporation, of which she became president in 2020. She now devotes a great deal of her time to PCH matters, and the special focus of her interest is affordable housing, expanding the number of affordable homes available as matters of fairness and equity with increasing the beauty of these homes. So she has a lot to tell us about how you go about it and what works. And with that, I'm very pleased to call upon Alice to speak. By the way, the format is going to be, the speakers will each take about 20 minutes. And you've got precedent to follow here. Our first panelists were amazingly timely. And we hope to have 20 to somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes at the end for questions. And then we'll hear some concluding remarks from Rabbi Goldson. So with that, Alice, take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be invited to address this large and interesting group today. The panel is very timely. Obviously, our democracy faces the dual challenges, existential challenges to our democracy of a severe case of income inequality that is increasing and a severe shortage of affordable housing. Now I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And let's see. Oh my. Oh no. Wait, I did something. Oh, here it is. Okay, good. Do I get 5 more minutes for technology issues here?
Oh, sure. It would be a major miracle that our rabbis would both remark on if everything went absolutely smoothly.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can't move you because I need to enable, well, if I can't, I can't. Well, here is a screen, some Zoom shots of our staff and some of our staff and trustees. And I don't know why it's not advanced. Oh, okay. All right. What I will speak about today is affordable housing from the perspective of a nonprofit developer. I'm going to tell you about Princeton Community Housing, who we are and what we've done. I'm going to give you a few updated statistics on affordability in Princeton, which is our major focus. And then I'm going to provide a concrete current example of the difficulties faced by a nonprofit developer trying to develop affordable housing. Well, first of all, we'll start off with who is PCH. We are a private nonprofit corporation. We're a developer and operator of affordable housing. We're a property manager. We're a coordinator of social services, and we employ about 30 people. We're an advocate for our residents and a good neighbor in our community. And we do that because we maintain our homes at the highest level. So, and if you walk around, you wouldn't know necessarily that it's affordable housing. We were established in 1967 by a group of concerned citizens who were worried that the culturally diverse community and economically diverse was going to disappear, and if more affordable housing options weren't opened up. PCH is the largest developer of affordable housing. We have 466 units, 1,000 residents, 4 communities, and we also have 2 locations that are in downtown Princeton. This is just a screenshot. We had 18 sponsoring organizations because we were unknown in 1967, which was prior to Mount Laurel, notably. And so we had to have these very fine local nonprofit institutions vouch for our bona fides. And that's just the university and others. Yeah, we got it. So what do we offer? We have a brand new preschool at the Marcy Crimmins Center, which is at Princeton Community Village. We have an after-school enrichment program. We have health and wellness. You see the list of things we provide. We provided COVID rent relief, and we also had, we provided injections on site for residents of the senior housing and at Princeton Community Village. What is affordable housing? Well, that is, that's a definition. It's housing that costs no more than 30% of gross income for housing costs, including utilities. And that, because basically beyond that, people have trouble affording food and medical care and have to make unacceptable trade-offs. Then, as we see here, who qualifies for affordable housing? These are the figures that you see here are based on Princeton area median income. And so it goes from 41,000 at 30% to 111,000 for low income. Then we have about 31,000 residents in Princeton, and you'll see from this chart we have 11,000 housing units. We have 1,200 that are currently deeded affordable, and we plan from our settlement agreement of our declaratory judgment action, 340 units planned. Actually, that says in the next 3 years, and you will see, as you see from this chart, where stops at 100,000, what we're looking at is roughly 40% have annual incomes that would qualify them for affordable housing. Conservatively, 25% of residents would qualify. However, less than 11% of our housing is deed restricted as affordable. So we have a problem. This is one of my favorite slides because I am very often asked, who are these various people involved in affordable housing in Princeton? And I get questions all the time. Can you differentiate them? So here we are. We have the Housing Authority, which was established federally in 1938. It's a municipal organization. I believe it may have changed. It is also nonprofit, and it operates and owns 236 units. As I said, we have 466 units, and then there are private owners who have other units. We also, and there is the Princeton Affordable Housing Board that is an advisory group. There's a meeting actually next week. And it monitors the compliance of the town with the Mount Laurel requirements. So there is, in a nutshell, the difference. PCH properties that currently exist, we established, once again, pre-Mount Laurel, 239 townhouses and apartments at Princeton Community Village, covering low and moderate income individuals. It took us about 6 years. We have Briggs Farm, which is a 50-50 marketable, affordable community. And we actually 50% are market rate, that it's 280 units, 140 are market rate, 70 are rented, actually are handled for sale by Princeton, and we handle those sales. And we have retained ownership of 70 very low income rentals. And that took us 5 years to develop. And that, I would say, that was developed and it was designed by Brecker, Qualls, and Cunningham. It's a distinguished project, and it's very nicely landscaped and nice. Our other housing is as well. I have to get here. Elm Court, which was established in 1985, and it has seniors and disabled adults, and it took us 5 years. And then we decided we would add on there, and we bought some more land next door, and we established Harriet Bryan House, and that took 8 years. There were many lawsuits of the residents. I would say that none of the things that were feared, as with the Ethel Lawrence houses, came to fruition. The property values in that neighborhood on Elm on Elm Road have not diminished to my knowledge. And well, then we get to the idea of building new homes. We are currently in the process of developing 25 new homes at Princeton Community Village. That's an existing site. We started with the idea in 2008, and we have an estimated occupancy of 2023. So the question is, why did it take so long? Well, when in fact, it's part of the settlement agreement that Princeton made with the court. It's an existing affordable housing site. We are not seeking competitive financing. In fact, it's an HMFA refinancing, and HMFA acts as the underwriter and sells tax-free bonds and lends us the money. We are having a very successful capital campaign. We are keeping the current residents apprised of progress. So I don't know why this, all right, sorry. Why is it taking it so long? Well, very simply put, developing affordable housing is a bureaucratic nightmare. I don't know if I think probably a lot of other folks know that too. And so we'll have a bit of history here. We started out in 2008 with the idea that we're going to create more affordable units because a 7.5 acre parcel was donated to Princeton Township, which was adjacent to PCV. However, that didn't work out so well because the town wanted to keep the parcel as open space. So then we started to discuss expansion on the existing site, filling in open space parallel to a pipeline easement. And a long negotiation ensued with the pipeline owner. I believe it was, I won't say it because I don't quite recall, but it turned out to be fine as long as we didn't pay the easement. It was going to be 50 feet from any of the new construction, but they just didn't want it paved. So then we sought HMFA financing. And whereupon bond counsel at a meeting absolutely refused our approach at the time, which was infilling along this pipeline easement, and they wouldn't endorse it, and so they absolutely refused to fund us, and so of course the project was dead. Now we fast forward a bit to the tenure of Governor Christie and co-op. Governor Christie was governor from 2010 to 2018. And he did various things. He didn't appoint new members to COA. In truth, COA had problems of its own before Christie, as we know. And I cite here an article which is Developing Effective Municipal Housing Plans, which gives the history of COA from the Mount Laurel Doctrine from its inception through 2015, when the Supreme Court took back enforcement of the obligations and gave it back to the courts. And it's a very fine history. And so if you just Google Developing Effective Municipal Housing Plans, that will come up. And it is a very good cheat sheet about it. Well, as permitted by the lawsuit in July 2015, Princeton filed a declaratory judgment action in Mercer County, seeking confirmation of its plan and its compliance with its obligations. In 2017, PCH revived the idea of developing an additional 40 units. In November 2019, we engaged an architect, but in discussions with the town, we realized that 40 units was really going to be too dense for the site. It would reduce the quality of life for all the residents, and parking would be a big problem, as it always is in New Jersey. On December 18th, which is after we had engaged the architect, Princeton's settlement agreement was signed, and the agreement included the PCV units. And then, of course, a busy 2020 ensued. We had, from August to September, we negotiated with Princeton for an affordable housing agreement and a new pilot agreement for PCV. In September, we got a 20-page financing document checklist that we completed and submitted to HMFA the next year in May. Then we went out to bid for a general contractor and we awarded a contract. In October 2020, we put together a site plan application to the planning board. We had been through the SRAB, the Site Plan Advisory Board review, and actually the planning board review could have taken place in December, but the planning board review actually took place in March. And I put here a few things that the planners wanted from us, which we did, added to the plans. And then we had to initiate requests for necessary approvals from a lengthy list of municipal, regional, and state entities and non-government entities. And you see here a list, I won't read it to you. And each of these entities had its own area of expertise, which it exercised. Actually, there was one example of very good change. The Princeton Shade Tree Commission pointed out that our landscape plans included invasive and non-native species plants. So we did change that. And in fact, landscaping is a very important part of the beauty of the site and the place where the people live. So that was a good thing. But very often the changes were just to prove that they were there. And then we had to respond to the comments, and we also had to get on the regulatory board agendas, which was no mean trick. And we did obtain a waiver of building permit fees, as we could under state law, but we had to provide a performance bond and put funds in escrow for the site engineering inspections by the municipality. And then in the spring of 2021, HMFA declared that we had filled out the wrong forms, which of course had been the ones that they sent us. So we had to redo them and send them back. And then at the end of November, this past November, we had a problem between Verizon and HMFA. Verizon has a cell tower lease on the PCV site, which gives us $25,000 a year in rent, which we like to have. And HMFA didn't like the noticing provisions in the subordination, non-disturbance, and attornment agreement. This is something I'll explain if there are policy wonks or lawyer wonks who would like to know what that is, or maybe anyway. The original affordable housing schedule had us obtaining land use by the end of March, securing financial approvals by the end of May. Construction would begin at the end of July, and we would complete construction by the end of August 2022 with an anticipated occupancy of 9/30/22. Well, with construction now beginning, and we have no allowance for any delay, we have the fall of 2023. The problem here is that they're sequential and interdependent regulatory approvals. So you need to first get one approval and then continue on with the process. And you have an attitude sometimes of bureaucrats who don't have a particular incentive to move affordable housing along, which makes the process lengthy and expensive. I was just looking at it. Princeton Community Housing, PCV, pays a pilot, which is a payment in lieu of taxes to the town of approximately $33,000 a month. So a delay of 7 months has cost us, because we are having a reduced pilot for the whole site of 2/3 of what we now pay. It's about $77,000, $11,000 a month. So this is not, an insurmountable sum, but it's an illustration of a cost of delay, and actually a hidden cost of delay. Now, it's a real challenge. This is an aerial view of the site when it's finished. And why do we continue to develop and advocate affordable housing in our community? That's simple. We keep our eyes on the prize. Here we have 3 of the 8 Princeton Community Village college students who received a total of $52,500 in scholarships. And I'm going to go to the next slide because I can never remember the names. And here you have the names of the New Jersey Affordable Housing Management. They supply the scholarships and people contribute money. And of course, the other prize is the improved lives of the people and our ability to live in a culturally and economically diverse community. Now, this, I would like to, if I can see if I can do this.
Okay.
I need to, oh, here it is. There it is, okay. This is an aerial overview prepared by our architects. Now, coming up in the front, in the center there, is an enhancement to the site. This is the existing clubhouse where we have the schools, and that is a mail and package delivery. This is the new building right here. And those 2 spots are 2 of 4 electric vehicle charging stations that we will be installing. And then on the side, we have a porch, an outdoor porch, which is an area for residents to congregate. And you'll see we have all the landscaping, and these are just obviously drawings, but they will be non-invasive native species. And it's a green, enterprise green is the level of, I guess, it's different from LEED, but anyway, and it's all electric, which is also a plus. And now in the lower left-hand corner to the left of the building is a recycling center, and now we're pulling away. This video was prepared by our architects, Kitchener and Associates in Collingswood, New Jersey, and I thank them very much. It was something I thought was terrific. Now, how can you help? Well, the answer is visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, donate. We are entering the public phase of the capital campaign that we're using to fund these 25 new units, and we've done very well. And we would encourage you to donate to us. One of the sources of materials, Common Bond, that was listed in the materials, asks for contributions to a Minneapolis organization. And I would say rather, keep it close to home. And I want to especially thank the lady whose name is the capital campaign manager, Cassie Yeager, who helped me with this PowerPoint. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Alice. Just wanted to mention, we have circulated a glossary of terms like Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency, which is a state agency that provides financing for affordable housing. And other terms like low and very low, which are the HUD definitions, or low and moderate, which are the Mount Laurel definitions, are also covered in this glossary. So you have other information. Plus, we provided some resources that you can look, some books and articles you can check, which will help. But you can see it's an involved and difficult process, even when there was fundamentally a consensus in the community that the housing should go through. But thank you, Alice, for showing us what's involved and for your request for help. With that, I'll turn things. I'd like to introduce Mitch Newman, who is with Lennar Builders as a senior vice president, and he's responsible for the daily operation, long-term planning of joint ventures between Lennar's Jersey division and other entities, and handles all elements of acquiring, evaluating, and compliance, regulatory compliance with land. And in particular, since Lennar, a lot of Lennar's projects involve an affordable housing set aside, Mitch has become very familiar with the processes of developing mixed income developments involving set asides. Prior to going to Lennar, Mitch was with another large builder, D.R. Horton, doing somewhat similar work. And when I first met him and worked with him, he was with the Hovnanian, which was at that point, the largest New Jersey developer and a real pioneer in developing affordable housing in New Jersey. So with that introduction, I think I'll turn it over to Mitch, and he can give us the perspective of the private sector in developing affordable housing. Mitch?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to appear before the group and continue the presentation. I do want to thank Alice. That was a great overview, because it goes over a lot of the different concepts that I deal with every single day. So when you showed that approval list and went through the time and energy you've been spending on your recent project, I was actually starting to get nervous because it reminds me of my day job. And this is supposed to be Sunday night. So with that, I'm going to jump to start sharing my screen and put up my PowerPoint presentation. Just excuse me while I move some stuff out of the way. And Peter, everyone can see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay,
fine.
great. Okay, good. So what I'm going to focus on is the subtopic for today, the process of creating affordable housing and supporting affordable housing in your community. And I put a few red smiley faces at various points in the presentation so that I remind myself to tell you that these are opportunities for community involvement. And we'll talk about that as we go along. Peter was kind enough to introduce me, and I did want to just take a moment to explain who is Lennar. So we'll do that rather quickly on our next slide. So Lennar is a private home builder. The company was founded in 1954 on the New York Stock Exchange since '72, a Fortune 500 company, very proud to be number 129. We build in 23 states, 76 markets, and we believe we're the largest home builder in the United States. I know there's lots of different ways to measure those kind of metrics. In New Jersey, we have about 10 active communities and 4 coming soon. And the majority of those communities, as Peter mentioned, are mixed communities, meaning a mix of market rate homes and affordable homes. And for those of you that know anything about Lennar, you might say, Mitch, you missed Idaho, because Lennar just opened a division in Idaho. And we're also hot on the trails on some communities in New York. So maybe when we check back, we'll have a couple more states colored in, and we'll have 25 and 78 markets. So that's Lennar, and I'm very excited and proud to be working in the New Jersey division, handling primarily land acquisition and governmental approvals. So what I want to do is give a quick overview of what I'd like to go through this evening in my presentation. First, we need to understand that it all starts with finding the right property. And that means property that is available for purchase, approvable, meaning it has a likelihood of getting through the governmental approval process that Alice described, developable, meaning it has access to things like water and sewer infrastructure and a road network. And it's a process that you can manage to conclusion. It also needs to be affordable, not necessarily affordable as to the homes and we want to build that are affordable housing, but affordable to manage through the process. But one of the things, interestingly, it should not be lovable, because the theory in the builder world is don't love the land. It's a process. It's going to hurt you, and it's going to go up and down. And at the end, when you're actually building homes and seeing families move in, then you can love the land. Typical business precepts go into making decisions on when to move ahead, the cost of the property, the time, the resources, and the benefit, which of course is profit, and of course is goodwill by providing beautiful homes for people, be it market rate or affordable housing. To do that, you need to find the right path. And that path typically starts with either a settlement conversation or resolution with the municipality, or going through the path of the black robe, meaning a judge, and having a process of litigation. So we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. You also need to have a site design that works, because you want to make sure that what you're doing and what you're pursuing is where everyone wants to land. There's no sense in starting a process if everyone doesn't understand where you want to go to the end result. So we'll talk about site design in a moment. And then we have the governmental approval process that Alice introduced, and I'll talk about that. And those are a lot of opportunities for public involvement. So I'll stop on that when I get there. And lastly, I've been a member of my local planning board for about 18 years. I've been the chairman for that time. So I also have the perspective of the planning board side of things. So we'll talk about that at a moment at the end. So now let's jump right in to the next slide, which is finding the right path, meaning you found a property that is potentially approvable, developable, manageable, and is one that is at a fair price. And now you have to decide, how are you going to proceed with it? If the town is interested in working with you in a cooperative way, then you would try to get to a settlement to put all the terms together as to how you're going to move ahead. And the reason for settlement is as it is with any other matter. You want to focus on perhaps saving time, saving money, getting terms in that settlement that you can live with, and hopefully getting to a point where you have certainty that you're going to get to an outcome in a timely fashion. And hopefully you don't fall into the phrase that Peter used, into a marathon, although it does typically feel like a marathon. And also, as Rabbi Blum said, you want to be in a point where you're joining hands and marching together. And ideally, a settlement gets you right to that point. But there's other times when you have to roll up your sleeves and arm wrestle and litigate. Those things do happen, but we do always hope that litigating and fighting is an opportunity for a settlement at the end. So either way, you need to find the right path to move ahead towards your affordable housing community. Regardless of how you end, whether it's through a settlement or litigation, you will typically put together a settlement agreement. And this is an opportunity, as I'll mention in a few moments, for the public to get involved and participate or argue if necessary. And that settlement agreement needs to be the roadmap to move forward. You need as many details as possible. And you want to include not just the township governing body, but you also want to include the planning board, because ultimately they're going to be the ones that'll have to handle it as a site plan approval. So better to get them involved as early as possible so they know what's coming down the pike and understand the expectations of the governing body. Very important is attaching that site design plan or concept plan that we'll talk about in a minute, so that everyone not only sees what you're planning in terms of words and numbers, but they also see it in terms of a plan. So everyone understands where the homes are going to be, what are the home styles, where the location of the various facilities, will there be recreation, and what's the road layout. So it's important to have that site design plan set up as early as possible. The settlement will also create the zoning for the property. So you want to have a draft of that zoning ordinance as part of the settlement. And it's really critical at this point to take into account as much different aspects of the site design that you can, so that your zoning ordinance that you build with the town in a cooperative fashion covers everything from setbacks to parking to home design and anything else anyone can think of. If possible, you want to include a timing mechanism so that you're not stuck in that 6, 5, 8, or 15-year marathon, as Alice and Peter were talking about, although even the best plans sometimes take a little longer. There's also potential where there's an affordable housing advocate that's been facilitating the process that may be entitled to legal fees. And while that's fine and it's part of the process, you want to see if you can identify the exact amount of those fees up front. And you also want to make sure the judge, and if there's a special master appointed by the judge, are not only involved in reaching the settlement agreement, but are ready to help out along the way as necessary. So when you hit that potential pothole or get into some arm wrestling, you can run to the judge and have him or her mediate and resolve as quick as possible without reverting back to full litigation. So the public involvement here is because the town council, the town governing body, will have to sign and adopt that settlement agreement. So this is the opportunity, if you're a concerned citizen, to pay attention to what's happening and either push the process along or advocate for some changes that might be important to you or to reach your goals. So let's just focus on site design a little bit. And these are just a couple of different plans, and we'll show a third one in a moment. So in site design, we want to make sure that our concept plan has as many of the features listed on our plan as possible, so that there's very little to debate later on, and everyone has the same expectations. The community to the left, as you can see, or the left of my screen, I hope it's to the left of everybody, which is more rendered, shows a recreation element up front along the state highway, and shows a bunch of townhomes and a stormwater basin to the bottom. Interestingly, we have the 2 affordable buildings, the 56 affordable rental units at the back of the site. And we initially received criticism that why are we hiding, or why are we pushing the affordables to the back of the site? But it was actually a positive. And when we explained it, it turned a few heads. First of all, we talked about the fact that putting the affordables up on the noisy, busy state highway probably wasn't very nice. And giving them the premium location along the rails to trails path at the back of the site was actually a premium location. There's no sidewalk, no bike path, and no other facilities up front on the state highway. So there was no need to even try to move the homes to the front. So eventually the town settled it in and agreed that this was the right location. The community to the right, the town, different town, of course, had a different vision, and they wanted the affordables more spread out. So the buildings in yellow show the affordable homes in essentially 3 different quadrants throughout the project. And then as we drop to another site design, again, the affordable homes are highlighted in yellow, with a couple of them towards the entry of the site, and then a few closer to the main recreation elements that I've highlighted to my right and a little to the left. So that they had access either to a recreation area or perhaps easier access to the main roadway, which would have a bike path and would have access to some facilities. So the key is that in that concept design, we want to try to get as much of the site designed up front so that everyone has the same expectations when we move ahead to what we call hardline engineering, which is where a lot of dollars get involved, and then the time commitment starts to kick in. One of the things we want to focus on is home design, because we have, as I showed you, the various affordable housing buildings in the community, but we're also always mindful of the fact that we would like those affordable homes to look as much like the market rate homes as is possible. So I just put up this slide as a simple example of one of these is an affordable building and one of them is a market rate building. And you might start the conversation with the building on the left having a rather vanilla or plain roof line and limited, this dark area is brick, and limited brick on the side of the home of the buildings. Then when you get to the building on the right, you see a little bit more diverse roof line and a little bit more brickwork on the side. So your first guess, I'm leading the witness, by the way, is that on the right side, that must be your market rate building, and the more vanilla building to the left with the vanilla roof line must be your affordable building. And of course, you know, it must be the opposite must be true. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone down this path. So that's our goal, to try to make the affordable buildings and the market rate buildings not only look the same, but if we can, just tweaks to the market, to the affordable building, so it has a little bit more design features. So next, you've reached a settlement. You have your settlement agreement signed. And now you are back in front of the judge for a fairness hearing, where the court will make sure that what you've settled works within the affordable housing obligation for the town. The judge will take testimony from the special master, if a special master has been appointed, as well as other experts. And this again is a time for public involvement, because this is a fairness hearing that'll get public notice, and objectors or advocates are able to step forward and either suggest to the court that this matter be pushed ahead and the fairness hearing be approved, or to argue that something might need to be changed or conditions need to be adjusted. Next part of the process, again, you have a settlement agreement, you have a fairness hearing, and now we need the town to adopt the zoning ordinance that's been part of that settlement agreement. And in that context, again, you have another opportunity for public involvement, because the town will have to adopt an ordinance. There'll have to be a hearing. It'll probably be sent over to the planning board for their review and comment. So there's an opportunity for involvement. From my perspective, from the builder's perspective, it should be rather simple. They're adopting the zoning ordinance that's part of the settlement agreement. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. In the case of the community to the right, at the last minute, changes were made, somewhat subtle, but very complicated to the ability to build the development. In this case, the town at the last minute added a payment obligation for each home, which resulted in over $1 million of extra payments, and then added a requirement. By the way, the affordable building is here in the bottom left, and this is a commercial building, and along at the bottom, added another element that the commercial building had to have a certificate of occupancy by the time half of the community was built. And in this location, and quite frankly, in current market conditions, a commercial building was not the right way to go. There's plenty of vacancies in this town and in this area. So effectively, from at least my perspective, this town had made some changes after all of this that effectively made the community undevelopable to achieve the goal. And of course, that resulted in more arm wrestling, but another reason to keep your eye on what's happening, whether as an advocate or as the builder in that public participation process. Now we get to the part that was giving me a stomachache before when Alice was talking about it, and that's the governmental approval process. And that is a rather lengthy process. My world record, my personal world record, I'm knocking wood, so don't jinx myself. My personal world record was 13 months to go from the beginning to the end with a community. But on average, it's 2 years if you're doing great, and usually closer to 3, 5, or 6 years to really get to the finish line to start building homes. But in that process, I want to focus on the fact that there's lots of opportunity for public participation, whether that's at the planning board level, at a planning board site plan hearing, or at the county level. The county does have open meetings. The state DEP has open meetings, DNR Canal Commission. In each of the agencies that we deal with, there all are a variety of scenarios of open public meetings, but you do have to do your homework to figure out when they are, because several of them are actually during the middle of the day, as opposed to the evening planning board hearings, which we're all used to. But it's a complicated and challenging process. And at the end, if you've done everything that you need to do and gone through that process, you can come up with a beautiful community like the one on the left, with the affordable housing component being about 20% of that development, or the community on your right, which is about 1,100 homes. The community is disconnected because, of course, we had a wide swath of wetlands that slowed us down. So of those 1,100 homes, again, another 200 are affordable in various places in the communities. What we also like to do, and Alice, you and I are going to talk offline later this week, is we like to bring in an affordable housing partner. And in this community, for example, there are 4 affordable buildings, and I'm highlighting them with my cursor, these 2 that are 19 homes each and these 2 that are 10 homes each. And what we did is we developed a community, built these buildings, and then sold them to an affordable housing operator who's then operating them as affordable rental homes. And we sold to one operator for these 2 19-unit buildings, and then to another for these 2 smaller 10-unit buildings. So it's a great way for us to bring in the expertise of that partner and sell, but to convey to them these buildings ready to go and ready for them to bring on their affordable residents. And it saves that affordable housing partner the time, effort, energy, and dollars for all of this process that we've been talking about. So in the process, we also, over the past couple of years, the virtual hearing effect has taken hold. And this, of course, is the opportunity for public participation in a little bit easier setting. It's easier to schedule the hearings. We don't have weather delays. We don't have vacation delays. It's a little bit better to control the process. And as I said, it's easier for folks to get involved just from their home, just like everyone's doing tonight. The burden, well, sometimes the burden is the same as the benefit. It's easier for the public to be involved from home. And in the case of trying to move a community forward, sometimes issues are brought up that simply don't facilitate moving a community forward. It's also not as easy to communicate with your teammates as you just can simply text each other as opposed to just leaning over and having a conversation. It's also a little tough when every town and every governmental agency seems to be on a different video method, whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or WebEx or Ring Central, and you have to be conversant in all of them. But what also happens is we can see each other very, very obviously in these meetings, and you can see that occasionally board members or the person testifying, such as myself, might be on the phone or checking their phone. You also see other distractions. And just for fun, I'll share with you, we had a community where the neighbors apparently enjoyed beverages during the process and were drinking cans of beer and what looked like glasses of wine, and then giving us their thoughts. We had one where a person refused to mute themselves, and every time we tried, the town tried to put them on mute, it didn't work. And the cage behind them, which we thought might have been a parrot, was actually a monkey, and the monkey never stopped screaming. So we had to conduct our hearing as we were pursuing our community with affordable housing through a monkey screaming, which that was quite the challenge. I hadn't had that before. They didn't teach us that.
What did that transcript look like? I
Yeah,
think we're going to need to wrap up fairly soon, Mitch.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we are on the second to last slide, Peter. Thank you for indulging me. So last slide before we say thank you. As a planning board member, we have to put all these concepts together, and we have to balance the obligation to proceed with affordable housing, as well as making sure that the public and the planning board are educated so that we work together and march together to reach the finish line. Sometimes it gets a little complicated and you need an escort to your car, which is why the virtual setting is sometimes even a little easier. Thank you. Happy New Year. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this evening.
Thank you very much, Mitch. I'm reminded that questions ought to be placed in the chat. I guess the speakers to date, Alice and Mitch, have answered all questions because we don't have any in the chat as of yet. So thank you both for your very comprehensive presentations. I would mention, Mitch said something about settlements. There are about 330 outstanding settlements that have occurred in this, what's called the third round, which promise another 60,000 or so affordable homes. And there's plenty of opportunity to get involved in the implementation of those settlements. So in a community, you can look at your settlement, should be at the township building, see what's happening with it, and see if you can get involved in helping effectuate the settlements. I'd also mention that the Fair Share Housing Center has been by court rule made a party in every one of the affordable housing cases. And if you want some information about affordable housing in your community, just contact them, because they are involved with just about every town in the state. So with that, I would like to introduce our last speaker, certainly not our least speaker, Diane Ciccone, who is an administrative law judge, was for 20 years, lived in West Windsor, and he served on the planning board. As a result of her interest in land use, she joined the West Windsor Municipal Council, which is had to be a thankless task, because that's one of the more difficult towns. I think my last Supreme Court oral argument involved West Windsor way back in 2001 or 2003. She served on the planning board and council during the time when the redevelopment plan near the train station was being developed, and a lawsuit was brought by the developers. Talk about a tough row to hoe. The lawsuit was settled by the council after pressure to increase the number of affordable housing in that plan. She also produced a film called Act of Faith on the Glen Acres neighborhood in West Windsor, which is one of the first planned integrated housing developments in our state. So with that, it's really important for us to hear from the municipal side. What's it like to be a municipal official who actually wants to see something get done in the affordable housing realm? And with that, I turn over to Diane.
Okay, thank you, Peter, so much. And I think.
And if I mispronounce your name, Diane, I apologize. There are many ways I know enough of Ciccones, and it's not always pronounced the same way, so.
No, that's okay. It was close. I want to thank the organizers, because this is an important topic. I want to first acknowledge the Lenape people, who were the first stewards of the land that we now all care about. And I also want to thank those who've been involved in the affordable housing movement. And when I think of what Rabbi said, joining hands, marching together, I think is very appropriate. So I wanted to really talk about generally what happens from the municipal side. As has been mentioned, there is a settlement agreement. West Windsor's third round is 1,500 homes, and near the end, I'll tell you what our stats are. But there are entities involved that are involved in when a developer comes in and wants to develop a site. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood those. There's, of course, the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The purpose of the Zoning Board Adjustment is to rule on deviations from the township zoning laws as outlined in Land Use Code Chapter 200. They hear and rule on cases of requests for variances, like setbacks to structures and exceeds of a lot's permit improvement coverage, as well as interpret use applications that differ from approved uses in a zoning district. The Zoning Board of Adjustment consists of 7 regular members and 2 alternative members. They are residents of the township and are appointed by the Township Council. The Planning Board, which is appointed by the mayor, is responsible for preparing the township's master plan, as well as subdivision and site plan review in compliance with requirements of the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law and Township Land Use Code Chapter 200. They also make recommendations to Township Council regarding proposed changes to the zoning ordinance and the official zoning map of the township. Planning Board is composed of 9 regular and 2 alternate volunteer members. They include the mayor, a member of council, a member of the Environmental Commission, and 6 other citizens and 2 alternates. So the municipal ordinance that guides affordable housing is section 200-237, affordable housing regulations. It's multiple pages, but I think the important thing about it is that in West Windsor, we require that any affordable housing is an inclusionary development. So that means we don't want it aggregated in a certain area, you want it to blend in. And it also means we don't have single affordable housing units in West Windsor. And I think we can have that debate and that question, what's better, what's worse, a combination, whether it's affordable housing in a development or a development that's all affordable housing. But that's the path that West Windsor has chosen. So there's, I think Mitchell mentioned the test for development is in West Windsor. It's a 4-pronged test. It's an approvable site, an available site, a developable site, and a suitable site. So how does it work? The developer, West Windsor, unlike Princeton, has a lot of land that still can be developed. And so developers will come into the township and say, hey, we want to develop some land, and go through the process. If it's a non-litigable process, they'll talk with land use development, and they will work with developing the site, developing the ordinances, site design, and it moves very smoothly. And it goes through the zoning board, it goes to the planning board, council, and then the mayor, and then it sort of sits on a list. If you go through our fair housing plan, you'll see there are a number of sites that have been approved by developers. They also tell you what the affordable housing element is. Now, so the point when we as residents can't really change the number of the numbers that we have to deal with are set. So we can't say our third round is 1,500. We can't say, well, we want 2,000 because it's 1,500. Except what happens is there are points in the process where you can get community involvement, the zoning board, the planning board, where in some cases, what we've had in West Windsor, particularly with redevelopment and with the Hughes property, they have come to the community to sort of feel out the community to see what they like and what they don't like. And sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not helpful. And as Mitch says, it can really prolong the process. So what happens then is the process goes through those steps, and it can take months, it can take years. If it's a litigation, then what happens? It goes to the court, and then it's the judge who makes the final decision. And so, like I said, once the judge makes the decision, then that's what it is. The other thing is that once the planning board makes the decision, that's what the numbers are going to be as well. So again, we want to have an inclusionary development. We want to make sure as the affordable housing units look very similar to the market rate units. So I just want to talk about for a second is low income. So the median income for West Windsor is 169,000, and where my notes are, low income goes from affordable housing income goes from 20,000 to 99,000. We have 1.8% poverty rate in West Windsor. And again, when we talk about the third round, so the third round obligation is 1,500. And we have age restricted units of 25% of the township's prior round obligation may be reserved as age restricted units. We have rental units. In addition, the township is required to provide a minimum number of rental units, specifically at least 25% of the township's prior round obligation must be comprised of rental units. Third round new construction obligation of West Windsor has a third round new construction obligation of 1,500 units. Similar minimum and maximum unit requirements are described as above to this obligation. So that's what we're looking at. That's what we're faced with. And we have a number of developments in the pipeline. So what we've done so far, let me give you our current stats. Where are my current stats? That's what happens when you don't have a, oh, 1 second. So our current stats: in the 20th century rounds, we fulfilled our obligation with family rental units, double credits for family rental units, family for sale units, senior units, both rental and for sale, housing for people with disabilities, and regional contribution agreements. In the 21st century, we are fulfilling our obligation with family rental units, double credits for family rental units, family for sale units, extended affordability controls for family units, senior units, both rental and for sale, housing for people with disabilities. There are other projects in the Affordable Housing Plan, but they do not come before the Planning Board and may undergo serious changes before they do. We do have a court-approved plan that includes these other projects, but it will be easy to change the plan if necessary, as long as we don't arbitrarily eliminate a developer who wants to develop. As Peter mentioned, it's kind of hard when the public gets involved to determine whether or not it's an issue that the development and the number of homes is too large and would have a pressure on the school, or an underlying current is that they don't want the affordable housing. I mean, I think that's always the pressure point. The past litigations in West Windsor, as Peter well knows, was really a question of the number of units in the development and the fear that it was going to overcrowd the school. So that's always, I think, it's a tension that it's kind of hard to tease out. In the redevelopment area, it came down to some of us on council really wanted more affordable housing than what the developer and fair housing COA had come up with. So again, there are points when the residents can get involved and press for more affordable housing to make it a little more equitable for people with lower and low income housing. And I think another thing that people sometimes forget, that affordable housing, people with low to moderate income are the people that could live in our community, who service our community. They're people that work in the stores, they're people that work in the schools, they're people that work in the hospital. And I think that's important for us to understand, that affordable housing allows people who work in a town to take benefit of the school and what it has to offer. So I think that's really basically what happens. And I'll entertain any questions.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Diane. We have a couple of questions, and I'm going to try to combine them where possible. And a couple of them are addressed to all the panelists, one or two of them, but I'm going to give everybody a shot at all of them. We got all this talent here. I'm not going to, muzzle anybody. Question came up in a couple of places, sort of towards Mitch, but I think everyone else will have a comment, which is how come the units are not scattered throughout individual particular buildings, as opposed to being put all within one building, and more generally about dispersal of units throughout the communities. So Mitch, why don't you start on that, and then Alice and Diane will probably have comments as well.
Sure.
We've got about 15 to 20 minutes for questions, just so you know.
Okay, not a problem, Peter. Lennar's theory is that affordable homes are very hard to sell because the buyers have a very hard time qualifying for mortgages, meeting the income requirements. So it is much easier to proceed with an affordable home as a rental unit. And the best way to manage a rental unit is to make them part of one singular one or several buildings and group those buildings together, because at the heart of it is we need to create an opportunity that is manageable and make sure it stays affordable. So that's why our thinking is to put them in buildings and try to keep them together. But as I showed, there are several municipalities that have us disperse the buildings. But no, we do not disperse a rental unit in the middle, so to speak, of a market rate building.
All right, Alice, Diane, any further thoughts?
Well, I think that's what our inclusionary provisions really provide, is that we want them, we don't want the affordable housing to stick out and let people know it's affordable housing. So when you have total integration, people will look at, hey, we're the same. And I think that's what West Windsor has tried to do, but we understand the pressure from the developer because it's kind of hard to put a rental unit in an area where it's market rate because it's difficult to manage and be able to get their profit. But that's what we try to do.
I will say we had one of the first, I don't know it's the first, so I'll say one of the first 50-50 market rate affordable housing. And it does mix rental and sales, and you cannot tell the difference between the houses. You would be hard pressed driving through Griggs Farm to identify the affordable units, and that's how we like to do it. Our other communities are 100% affordable, but we would like to go forward with a market rate and affordable, and we would go forward with the plan of not having them identifiable or segregated in one place.
All right.
I would just like to say that's
Sure.
perhaps because we're a nonprofit developer, and it's not as key. The idea of being able to sell the units. I should add that as well. That's a different set of pressures that we don't face.
And I'd like to add, I think when you talk about new construction, because we have places where you can develop, where Princeton, I don't know how many sites you have available, that we can insist upon inclusionary, where Princeton may not be able to do that as well.
And Peter, I did want to add that despite the fact that I was focused on the fact that our affordable homes are in separate buildings, two of the examples I did show had the affordables mixed into two of the market rate buildings. Just didn't want to get into all the weeds. So our preference is that they're in a separate building, but yes, as Diane is saying, sometimes we have to do some things a little different and we figure it out, and it's okay. We have to move together cooperatively.
It's interesting you mentioned that affordable for sale housing is a tougher row to hoe than affordable rental. And I think that's worth a comment.
Yeah, just our experience is that finding buyers is tough because they not only come to the table with their income having to be at a certain level, but they also will need to get a mortgage. And when those folks have the pressures of student loans, car payments, and other credit card debt, it makes it a little tough to find the way to get to a successful mortgage equation in that scenario. We also have in our communities homeowner association dues. So that's another added element that you have when you have for sale housing as opposed to a rental.
A couple of questioners asked about transportation for people who live in affordable housing. I tend to think this is more of a non-issue than an issue because, as I think Diane mentioned, you're talking about people already in the community and getting around. But have at it. What do you think of? Do you think there are real transportation issues involving residents of affordable homes?
It depends on the location, I would say. Certainly, Princeton Community Village ideally would be closer to the center of town, but we do have through the town, there are buses that come and stop by, and so that is not a problem. And they also stop at our senior communities on Elm Road, and so I don't see it as a terrible problem.
Diane, Mitch?
I mean, I could see it as a problem if someone wants to move into the community that doesn't have a car. But most, so there might be a percentage of people that wouldn't look at the community because they don't have a car. But I think most people do have transportation. There's not a really good bus system in West Windsor, but then of course you have the trains. So if someone wants to come out here and take benefit of the school system, they can hop on a train to go back into New York to work.
And Diane, we also see that our affordable housing tenants, or when they're for sale, almost all exclusively do have cars. We do love it when we can find a community that's adjacent to an employment center or to other services, but it doesn't always break that way for us. But cars do seem to be prevalent at all income levels.
I think that's accurate. We have, most of our residents have cars, and some, and certainly at Princeton Community Village, some have a few cars because you need to get to a job.
There was a question about the valuation of affordable homes that might be sold, as you were describing, Mitch, when you sell them to a nonprofit developer, or looking at from Alice's standpoint as a developer of such homes. But
Sure,
how
well,
you would value them in that context.
well, I don't want to start negotiating with Alice over this video call, but
On the other hand, if you get a little bit done, then your next call will be quicker.
You're right, Peter. I'm going to set the table for that call right now. So, of course. So Alice, this is how we think about these things. We typically and generally, and don't hold me to it, what we would look to is to convey the building to the affordable housing operator at our basic, what we call sticks and bricks cost. So we take on the obligation of buying the land and getting the approvals and doing all the land development. And we would look to get reimbursed for the cost to actually construct the building, because we realize that there's a benefit to the affordable homes being in the community, and there's a benefit to them having some ability to make the deal work, so to speak. So that's how we would generally look at it. And I hope you didn't write any of that down.
She won't forget. She's been at it too long, Mitch. The other thing I'd mention in terms of valuation, that the affordable housing is generally, for property tax purposes, if this was part of the question, is valued at the use value. So an affordable restricted development is valued as, with the restrictions in place in terms of sale prices or rentals. So that part of valuation is different for affordable homes than for standard homes. In other words, if a house can only sell for 100,000, it's valued at 100,000. The assessor has to treat it that way. The assessor can't say, well, in the open market, this would get 400,000, and that's the property tax. So that's an issue that has been resolved a good while ago. There was a question about accessory units. Are they a good or a bad thing? Are they effective in producing affordable housing? And these would be, I guess, granny flats or daughter-in-law flats, second homes, elder cottage housing opportunities, which we used to talk about, those sorts of things, and maybe group homes.
Princeton has recently passed an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. It actually, it was amended so that you could have separate owners of the units. And I guess that it then has to be a condominium form of ownership. The jury is out. I would say we really don't have, certainly in this state, I won't hesitate to say that, the experience that would allow us to say this is a success or not. I think in the literature that I've read, it's kind of viewed as a way of increasing density and therefore increasing the supply of homes available, and hopefully some of those will be affordable. In Princeton, there is a recent example that was profiled in the New York Times about, I don't know, within the last month, of a 0.19 acre lot being divided into a large house, which went on the market for, I believe, $1.2 or $3 million and sold immediately. And then the accessory dwelling unit, so-called, was on the market for $849. And I have been watching it because I'm interested in it. And it was initially sold, but I believe that it was unsold. The deal seems to have fallen through because what I recently saw, it said that the house was taken off the market, and also that was part A, and part B was that it was not sold last year. which was when it was constructed. So I don't know. I think I looked at Maplewood also has an ADU ordinance, and it differs from ours. The $849,000 unit in Princeton had 3 bedrooms and 3.5 baths. And how do you do that when you're supposed to be building an 800 square foot house? Well, you use all the levels, and you create something that you call an attic, which is allowable under our ordinance. And so that's how you get 3 bedrooms and 3.5 baths. The Maplewood statute limits you to 2 bedrooms and has to be a single owner. So I think the jury is out. We'll have to see. Los Angeles, by the way, has a 34-page ordinance. It restricts it to certain areas, some of which you would recognize, Calabasas and places like that. So I don't know. We'll have to see.
I would mention that the COA regulations, the Council on Affordable Housing regulations, only allow 10 units to be in accessory apartments. And in my town, West Amwell, at least on the earlier rounds when prices weren't so crazy, we actually had 10 units that were filled, but I gather that was an exception, as you indicate, Alice. I'm not sure it's been used that extensively in most places. There was a question about the rehabilitating homes and whether credit is given for rehabilitation of homes. And I think we haven't gone into the 2 kinds of need, the new construction and the rehabilitation need. And maybe I should just say there are 2 kinds of towns have obligation to improve the existing substandard housing, which is separate from the obligation for people who might be expected to move in there. So the rehabilitation is usually done for the existing substandard housing. And I think that should answer that question. The last question was, how do you do 100% affordable? How do you finance 100% affordable housing? And that sounds like an Alice question, but I'm sure the rest of you have some comment too.
Well, you have a sort of the public funding, and that has shrunk down. You had various programs at HUD, which have kind of gone by the wayside, or I think the 202 program may be being revived, but you have the New Jersey Mortgage Finance Agency, which has funds. It has the competitive program through the IRS, where states get a certain allocation of funds and you compete for the bonds to finance your project. We just, on this last round, we had used the competitive finance method originally at PCV in 1975. This time around, we did not use that. We used the method where HMFA acts as the underwriter and sells the bonds and it takes a mortgage and gives us the money. But as I was alluding to, they have very, very high standards, and you have to meet all the standards. You have to meet that 20-page list of documents and hope that they've sent you the right form. But actually, I must say they are very, very good, and that is how you do it. It's public. We also actually, I should say, we have a capital campaign. We have put up some equity ourselves, and so it's a mixture of financing.
Well, I actually see there were a bunch of other questions were asked, and some very good ones. We're not going to have time to answer them, but I'm going to throw them out just so see what people have been thinking. Is consumer credit factored into the income guidelines or limits for affordable housing? What about the need for profit and the issue of discrimination? Are they barriers to affordable housing? And then there's some question, which I think we kind of dealt with in the last hearing, but it's a question, what about the skills and the abilities of the economic welfare of the people who are moving into the housing? These are interesting and good questions, but I think we do have to wrap up. maybe if we can find some way of following up with the recording and getting back to people. We are going to be sending out the resources list after the program. I was wrong, the glossary was sent out, but not the resource list. And maybe we can take a shot at trying to deal with some of those questions at that point. Or we can have session number 3. Because even in an hour and a half, we can't answer all the questions, as you can see. And with that, it'll be my pleasure to call on Rabbi Goldson to first of all, I'll thank everybody again after the Rabbi finishes, but at this point, I would like to call on Rabbi Goldson for a few comments to conclude
Well,
us on
thank you, Peter.
lofty note.
Thank you, Peter. Well, thank you to our wonderful speakers for teaching us so much. As we bring this to an end, I really just want to offer a closing benediction. Eternal God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather with friends to learn how we can make a difference in helping those who do not have affordable permanent housing to be able to do so. We're grateful to you for guiding us and giving us strength and courage and the wisdom to seek solutions to these problems. Now, as we conclude our time together, we pray that you continue to open our eyes to the beauty of life. Help us to perceive what we have ignored, to uncover what we have forsaken, and to find what we are searching for. Remind us that we don't have to journey far to discover something new, for miracles surround us, blessings and holiness abound. And you are near. Bless our families and bless each of us as we now return to our lives and take time to rest and rejuvenate so that we can rise once again tomorrow in health, allowing us to continue to do your will by serving others. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. I hesitate to say much after that spiritually uplifting comment, but I do want to thank our speakers, each and every one of you. Mitch, Alice, Diane, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and time with us on a Sunday evening when I'm sure we'd all be like to be relaxing. I'd like to thank Linda Oppenheim, Linda Melstein, and everyone else who helped put the program on. You can see how smoothly it went. So technically, and Lori Watson too, and Betsy, you can see what a skillful group we have making this production possible and having it run so well. I would mention that this program largely originated because people got in touch with probably Linda Oppenheim and said, what's next? What makes housing real? So we'd love to have you contact Linda or any of us and see what you would like to do for a third program. Because obviously there's a lot of ground still to cover. There's numerous issues regarding affordable housing that we haven't yet dealt with, and the issue of geographical segregation in New Jersey and in many places is sort of touched on in one of the questions. The issue of profit motive, the role of banks. So there's a lot still to discuss, and we'd love to hear from you as to where we could go from here. So with that, I think I can conclude the program. Just looking here, nope. I was wondering if I had to return it back to Betsy, but I've got the full authority as a former judge to gavel the program to a close. And thank you all for joining us and participating. And
Thank
hopefully
you.
we'll see you again.
Thank you, Peter, for a wonderful moderator.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night.